Howdy y'all, welcome back to B-Rad Garage. Today we're going to take a look at some rust removal techniques, kind of getting some of these tools back, I won't say into working shape, because technically these work. In fact, on a couple of these, like these old slip joint pliers, you can see I've put WD-40 on them in the past, but still got some surface rust, a little bit deeper rust on them. Standard pliers, about in the same shape. Again, functional, but dirty, rusty. These nippers, same kind of deal. On these old tin snips, I have ground a little bit before to see if I could kind of bring them back around, but thought I would just touch on them again and see. And then the only wood handle tool we've got right now to kind of mess with is going to be this old ball peen hammer. Never taken off one of these plastic type tops before, so we'll see how that goes. I think we're probably going to do maybe vinegar or the vinegar and salt method, just good old elbow grease, sandpaper, maybe some scouring pads, SOS pad type deals, just some things like that to kind of see what kind of works best for us and what you might have just laying around the house that you can get to work on removing some rust and trying to get some old tools or some old things to be rad again. So I think for our first attempt to do with these old slip joint pliers, I've just got a standard cup. I think if you really want to do this to clean this entire unit, then you'd want a plastic container you could lay this down in and submerge it. But I think kind of for our experiment, probably going to just get enough vinegar and salt in here to kind of do the working pieces of the tool. Just that way we can kind of see the difference in what it does. And I've just got standard white vinegar here. Just stole this out of the wife's cabinet, and just some standard salt. The salt, I believe, is kind of an additional. A lot of the old timers I knew just did vinegar, sometimes a vinegar and water mix, so it wasn't quite as strong. But I've also heard that salt can be used, so I figured why not just throw that in. This is an 8-ounce cup, so let's see kind of what, probably about 6 ounces it looks like. Will that get my, yep, looks like that'll get through, like say, the working parts of it. Now again, I had sprayed that down with WD-40 at another time. Let's just do probably what, about a tablespoon or so. And then let's just see here, kind of stir it up with our tool here. Looks like that is going to fit. Stir this up just a little bit more. I think probably the best way to look at this will be to have this soaking, you know, half hour, 1 hour, 2 hours, kind of see the difference. I will tell you, my kids wanted to do this with a coin. They had a couple of old pennies that were really gross, and they wanted to kind of see if they could clean them up. Well, they forgot about them and they sat in the cup for a couple of weeks, and it ate all the way through it. So vinegar actually can get pretty deep in here. So if you do this, don't let it sit for weeks and forget about it. So we've got that submerged. Again, not very scientific. I'm sure that the internet can tell you which parts to part, but I believe that was about a tablespoon of salt to about 6 ounces of vinegar. So we'll kind of let that soak and see what we end up with. I believe with our standard pliers here, we're just going to go the old school sandpaper route, trying to knock some of this off. Now with sandpaper, as you'll see, I've got a couple of these are actually quite different, but that's kind of why I picked them. With sandpaper, the lower the number, the rougher the sandpaper is and the more aggressive that it is. So this 60 grit that says coarse is going to be a lot more aggressive and abrasive than this 150 grit medium. So again, different types. If this had big chunks or serious, then you would definitely want to get these sanding sheets. And if you had something a little less, like this is fairly smooth, but I think we're going to try both just to see how it affects it. And as an aside, these are actually meant for a sanding or machine hand or machine sander, not necessarily just for hand sanding, but we're going to use it for that today. And these the same way. These are actually made just to fold and to use as hand sanding. So I think we'll start with the 60. A lot of times with sandpaper, if you fold it and let it crease and maybe fold it back over and see if you can catch that same crease, as you can see, it's pretty difficult with the rough grit. Kind of helps it tear, and then you're able to get it apart without it just ripping and making a strange shape. So I guess we'll just pick one of these arms here, this one, and we'll kind of see what the 60 grit does. Now again, it's a fairly aggressive sandpaper, but at the same time, as you can see, we've already starting to show some silver here, and we're knocking off that rust. So that's a great sign. And as you'll notice, we're not really tearing our sandpaper up. So let's just give this another couple of swipes here, and let's see what it looks like on the 150. So yeah, as you can see, quite a difference. Now, I will say again, with this being so abrasive on a softer metal, or let's say like a wood, this is actually going to tear away and move away material. So let's see how it reacts with the 150 over here. Then we're just going to fold in half here. You can see it folds quite a bit easier with the 150 than it does with the 60. Basically just tears apart there. I'm actually going to go one smaller, since we're on these small legs here. And then let's see what we got with the 150. Already starting to see some silver, so it's doing something. This is maybe a little fine for this job, but at the same time, I'll try to get it closer to the camera and show you. You're not going to have the same marring and the same marks from the 150 as you do from the 60. So I don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up, but you can see these definite lines. And it's slightly grooved, nothing awful, but slightly grooved. This, however, is totally smooth to the touch. So about the same level of effort. And with this being what I'd classify as surface rust, I think that the 150 is fine. A good general use is about 100 grit, good general use sandpaper. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good showing of the difference in an abrasive, like a lower number, like a 60 or 80, versus a higher number. They go way, way high in the range. There's guys that are wet sand and paint on cars with, 2,000 grit and things like that. But for our purposes, just kind of looking at what you can pick up at your local Walmart or any place that you could get these type of sand and papers. So I think that's a pretty good example of those two. All right, y'all. So I don't know how well my camera's going to pick up. I'll try to bring it up here. You can kind of see this layer of crust, kind of like we talked about. Man, these are loose goose. Anyway, looks like there's a definite line where the vinegar had kind of stopped. And over here, we must not have any of this kind of zinc, kind of silver on this piece, because it's just black and then kind of the rusty red on the other parts. So I got to looking at this. Pretty gross. I mean, not really maybe as bad as I thought, but I was going to see how much we ended up with if I can pour this nice and slow in the bottom here, because this was kind of surface rust, not too bad, and it's not too bad. That's quite a bit of chunks that it peeled off of there. So I think that was worth doing, especially kind of for a set it and forget it kind of method. So I think the first thing we do here is really just wipe these off. So I've just got the standard little kind of blue shop towels you can get at Walmart, auto parts stores, wherever. You can see this is our side we've actually hit with the sandpaper until it looks different. So we'll kind of compare those two here in a minute. Let's wipe that off. Don't think the simple wipe here is going to get that done. But it is knocking off the loose falling down on our down here. Yeah, we're definitely pulling some stuff off of there. Cool. see here. All right, not bad. I mean, again, you can't tell, but it's a lot smoother than it was. We'll try something a little different here in just a second. Let's just wipe this off. Interesting. It's like different colors. And I do have gloves on today. Not that this is so caustic or whatever, but I gotta say, vinegar stinks. I know there's some people like the way it smells, but I don't like it. And kind of one of those things where if I don't have to smell like it, I'd rather not. So let's see, let's wipe some of this off. Yeah, to get down in there. Yeah, again, a little bit of a color difference you might be able to see, but this is, even with the gloves, I can tell, a little bit smoother. So again, not too bad for a leave it alone type deal. There's a bunch of cool ways you can do this. Electrolysis with like DC current, you know, actually evaporating basically the rust, kind of charging it off there. Pretty neat. But yeah, as you can see, this may work better for bigger chunks, like if this was truly filled in all these grooves, or if this couldn't turn, couldn't move. So I think useful, but maybe not the end all be all. I think the next thing we do is maybe try just some steel wool on here. This is a 0. I don't know if you can tell, but it's got from fine to coarse, this quad 0. There's guys that even use that to wipe down like wet paint and things on old cars. Like Freiburger does that, Vice Grip Garage has done that. So pretty neat. This is just a 0 that I had here. You can tear this off to make it kind of fit your needs if you want to make it smaller. So we'll do that here. We'll just make us a little square here. And then let's look at our zinc part here and see. Yeah, this is okay. So this may be where the vinegar is helping us out, because this was not sanded with our sandpaper. I don't know if you'll remember, but it was quite a bit darker than kind of this silvery, kind of zinc coated. Okay, pretty cool. So now here's one that has not been sanded at all. Let's see, with just kind of scrubbing here. Okay, that's pretty neat, y'all. Might have to give the vinegar some props here, because this is a very light abrasive. Again, you saw the 0 kind of in the middle. It's not extremely coarse or anything. And you can kind of work down into these corners because it is flexible. Now, it does have kind of some fibers. You can see some right here. So you don't want a fan blowing in your face. You may even want to put on your safety goggles if you're going really wild on this and really scraping away. But gloves are never a bad idea, because they're not extremely poking through you, but they can definitely sting a little bit. Let's see, let's knock this off. We can do with just the whole set here. Now these legs we did sand, but we're not in the vinegar, and I think it's already doing a little better job just having the steel wool being able to just lightly, that abrasive, to knock that off of there. Let's see if we can't really scrub here. That's pretty neat, pretty good deal. If you'll notice, we've got basically silver all the way through here. Missed a spot. What we got here? Kind of wipe that off. Yep, yeah, just a little bit of elbow grease. This came off really easily. This again was sanded, but not vinegar. So again, if you had something to put down and cover this would be a pretty good solution, I think. These are completely serviceable rust wise, but this gap here, this is just too much play. We may see about maybe pounding that down with a hammer. I don't think there's any threads there to tighten, so we'll see what we can do with that. But let's move on to the one that has not been sanded. This is kind of the one I'm interested in to see how this turned out. So this is no prior sanding. If you remember, we just put this in the vinegar, nothing special. Definitely kind of chewing off the fibers, which that's going to happen. But okay, that's pretty neat. Pretty neat. I'll bring that up to the camera here in just a second. Let me scrub on this for a minute. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Okay, that's pretty neat. I don't know how well you can tell, but definitely a lot more silver and cleaner looking than this brown rust color right here. These big kind of pitted chunks, I feel like they would be gone. There's even some writing kind of hidden down in here. That would be cool if the Vinegar brought that out. We may drop these down in a pan and see, maybe in just to check in a future video, kind of see how long it took to see if that's really going to work for you, because you can't just leave it in vinegar forever, because it will start to actually attack the metal. It attacks the rust first, but if it gets down below that layer, it's going to attack the metal. So all in all, that's pretty good. Definitely it's not going to get your hands dirty on this one. This, obviously, we need to clean more. And we may look into, that's a lot of slop back and forth, so we may need to look into that. But I gotta say, I think for small things and, you know, just a household item you get at the grocery store, I think the Vinegar worked out pretty well. So I think these tools are well on their way to being rad again. All right, just got our standard bread tie here. Now, you could absolutely strip this down or just shave it off with a knife and get to that wire. But just so it's a little bit easier to see, I'm gonna see if we can do it with the little paper still on. It's really kind of interesting. There's enough of a gap to where it really affects the use of these pliers. But then when you're trying to put something in between, the gap is almost minuscule. So really strange how it can be that small of a gap, yet affect the tool that much. Let's see if we can bring this all around here. This is a very, very thin wire, as I'm sure everybody knows these bread ties, and it still is not really wanting to go in there. See if we can twist it here. Kind of force it to get in there without twisting too much and it breaking. See here. Just kind of a theory, y'all. I don't know if this is gonna work or not. Just twist it up here. Let's go ahead and cut it and see what happens. You know, might be just the tiniest bit better. Now this will probably get weak and break, or might even untie and come off there. But again, just kind of around the house or when you're somewhere else. I don't want to use the word hack, but just another strategy. We wouldn't put it on this side because the open and closing side is on here. So we wanted it on this bias side here that kind of stays in one place. But yeah, I believe that's going to work. That's still got some play in it for sure. These pliers are not going to be great in the wide position for sure. They definitely move back and forth. They are a little bit better in the closed position. Again, not great, but better. So I'd call that a help. Not a win per se, it's not a fix, but I think that did help them. I know the earlier part of the video we're kind of focused on rust removal, kind of bringing these tools back around, but another aspect of that is sharpening something that may need to be sharpened, such as these old tin snips. Now, there's a little bit of wobble in them, and not really the kind of thing that can always be just repaired, but for a set of tin snips, that's kind of an allowable amount of play between the two. So, as I mentioned earlier, I had hit these with my grinder, my angle grinder, for a second, and I thought, you know, maybe I just gave up on that, or I missed that. I hadn't seen that when I pulled these out for the rust video. So I thought, well, let's kind of talk about what we did with our sandpaper, like we do with our files here. So this is a hand file, and it's kind of like sandpaper. If you notice, I don't know how well the camera's going to pick that up, but this is very coarse, kind of like the coarse grit on the sandpaper. This is a very coarse file. Now you can compare that one to this one that a lot older. Actually, I got this from a yard sale, but as you can kind of see, there's a lot less grooves and a lot less cross cutting. So this would be more of a finer edge, not going to remove as much material, where something like this is going to be fairly aggressive. So let's take a look at those pieces that I had cut. Now this is not sharp to the touch. Now these are tin snips, they're not scissors, but at the same time they're cutting metal and things, but you do want some kind of edge on them. I had done that to knock off the rust, but I have not sharpened down along this edge or through here. So let's do like we did before, and let's take our metal, our coarse file, and we're just going to move down basically flat. I'm not pulling any sort of angle on this or anything, moving slightly down, but really that's just the way the file's carrying. And then let's see, we've knocked off some more material, and I can kind of feel a difference there already. So let's take it here. Let's kind of keep that angle. Basically just try to knock some of this rust off. If we can add a little edge, then that'll benefit us. It is, again, I wouldn't necessarily use the word sharp, but I can feel resistance against my thumb when I pull it back over here. Now, again, this is flat, but not sharp. So let's compare it to the finer grit of this older one, this older file. Probably can't pick it up, but it makes definitely a different sound as it drags across. It does not sound as angry, I guess I'd say. Now that definitely feels sharper. Definitely feels sharper. So like I say, we're just following this angle. Not a lot of force I'm using here. You kind of want to let the tool do the work. And then a quick note about edges. So this is our finer file. And again, this feels fairly sharp. On the other side with our coarse file, you can feel an edge, however not quite as fine. Now, with something like tin snips, actually this type of sharpening with a file like this may be beneficial, and you may want that because it is a bit rougher and a bit duller per se, but it's cutting through a heavy material like tin or a piece of metal, not like your scissors that are going through a flimsy piece of paper that need to be razor sharp. And also, sometimes those nice sharp edges are a finer edge and are more prone to chips and cuts. Again, not so much a problem with scissors, but if you're cutting through metal, it could be an issue here as well. So just thought I'd throw in a little bit about files, kind of following the same process as the sandpaper. The rougher the grit and the rougher the grit on the sandpaper are the same as a file, going to take off more material. And I don't know, I may leave these just the same. I'm kind of a sucker for old tools that are functional, so I may leave these alone, but just thought I'd throw in a little bit about files and just kind of see if we could get something going there. Well, rookie mistake. Looks like I didn't record that last clip. Didn't do a whole lot, but I'll have to reshoot this for y'all. So in the case of like these nippers, I don't think you're always restoring tools to pristine or to new. A lot of times you just want them serviceable where you can use them, but you don't want to get grease and everything on your hands when you're using them. So I thought we'd just maybe hit this with the 150, and maybe for a different type of lubricant, maybe use this old school 3-in-1 oil you can get at usually at Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot type places. But yeah, we'll just spend a little bit of time with this 150. This is very light surface rust. There's no like pits or anything really deep on these, so it shouldn't take a whole lot. That's why we're not using the really aggressive 60. Already getting a little bit of silver there. Looks a little more like metal. So we'll just spend a little bit of time with these and come back to them and see what that looks like. All right, so we got about 15 minutes total. As you can see, definitely knocked off a lot of that surface rust. This is nice and smooth to the touch. Not perfect, and again, I know a lot of y'all are probably out there saying, you know, you're not really restoring this tool, you're not really bringing it back. And you know what, honestly, I'd agree with you. I'm not going the full 9 yards trying to get everything exactly perfect, but I am trying to get a usable piece of equipment out of something that came from a yard sale. Camera may not pick up a huge difference, but a little bit of soap and water and a paper towel on these handles, they feel so much better. Got so much of the gunk and grime off of them, and they've got a little bit of that kind of tackiness that helps you grip them that was kind of lost by being covered in grease. So kind of what I was talking about earlier with this 3-in-1 oil, as it says on here, lubricates, penetrates, rust, cleans, 3-in-1. But I've been using this. My grandfather used it, my papa, my dad, all them. I use it. It is a petroleum-based product. So sometimes this may not work for exactly what a lot of people don't like to use it on wood, things like that. It kind of gives you some expected uses here, or intended uses, apologies. But looking at this tool right here, this is kind of your movement. It already has helped a little just for me knocking off some of this rust, but I think I'm going to put a few drops here, down the side, down the top, and then actually right here, and see if we can't work some of that rust out and kind of free this action up a little. So let's see here, we'll go 1, 2, 3, let it kind of sit down, put another 3 on this one, and let's just drop 1 or 2 down the middle, and then just 1 here on the front. So they kind of want to stop right here, but if you notice, you can force them to go the rest of the way. This is what I'm hoping to be able to do without forcing and pulling them. So we'll just do that now, kind of force them back and forth, see if we can work some of this lubricant down in here, see if it can loosen rust like it says it should. Not seeing a lot come up around here, but there might be a touch. That usually is a good sign if you can get rust to kind of work up from around the moving parts. Kind of tells you that it's working in there. I do see that it's hanging on pretty well. That's another thing I like about this. If you'll notice, I lost a drop here, but it kind of stays where you put it as long as you don't overdo it, unlike a lot of sprays that just run right down and then you've got it all over your hands and everything. So let's see here. Nothing fancy here, folks, just again, good old elbow grease. We're starting to maybe see a little bit of brown there. Maybe we're working some of this rust loose. Yep. There. Yep, definitely knocking some of it out. So again, cognizant of y'all's time, let me spend about another 5 minutes or so on this, and then we'll see how this turns out. All right, y'all, so I lied to you a little bit. It wasn't about 5 minutes. It was about 10 minutes I spent. But if you'll notice, I did one more run of about 3 drops on each side and on the middle here. And if you notice now, for about 60-70%, flicks open pretty easily. Kind of close, you kind of have to tap it. But to get the full lock, you still do have to kind of pull it. I got to thinking that may not be the worst thing in the world in case you're trying to reach a place or get somewhere to cut something. But again, it does make it harder to actually close. So these are not perfect. I believe they could get pretty close to that if you spend some more time with them, maybe used a more aggressive cleaner. But this is kind of a middle of the road solution where it's cleaning and kind of knocking out rust, but it's also kind of staying on there, and it's also being a little bit of a barrier, a little bit of a protectant. In fact, it kind of, after I wiped it off with my paper towel here, kind of leaves a little bit of a sheen. It's nice and smooth, so it'll kind of help protect that metal as well. So again, just trying to get this back on the road per se. Not going to be perfect, but going to be serviceable. So I think that worked out pretty well. So I don't know if y'all can tell, but I'm really trying to use things that, you know, hand tools, readily accessible things. I don't want to use a bunch of niche power tools that maybe not everybody has, everybody can afford, but I thought in the event of this hammer, this ball peen hammer, a lot of small areas, a lot of hard to reach places, if you were hand sanding or trying to use like a grinder or something, it might be kind of tough to get in those spots. So I thought, you know, let me break out my Walmart special here. This is just a 1.5 amp rotary tool. Has a ton of little attachments. There's little barrels for sanding. This is like a tiny, like a little wire brush we're going to try to use to get in there. Now on these can spin pretty high revolution, and you really got to be careful. Follow all the safety instructions. Wear your safety glasses, wear your gloves. I can't find my actual mechanics gloves, so I'm using my winter gloves. It is far from winter in Texas, but if you'll look here, we've got a speed control on this one. Goes up to 6 actually. So I like to start with the lowest setting, make sure that everything is tight and safe before I actually put it on what I'm working on. And you always want to have things pointed away from you. You wouldn't want to work with the tool like this. You're going to want to work with it like this, spinning in a clockwise rotation. So whatever you're kicking up here is going to kick out this way. You'll probably see on the video. But let's go ahead and maybe see if we can get in kind of these nooks and crannies and see how this works. Let's see if it bogs down if we use it on one here. A little bit, but it does get in that groove really nicely. Let's go to 2. I'm also applying basically no pressure, letting the tool do the work for a couple of reasons. One, you've got the tool, let it do the work. 2, something like this little wire disc, a little wire brush type, all these little fibers can just go spinning and flying everywhere. So you wouldn't want to put a bunch of force on it and help them exit any faster than they want to anyway. Let's see what we got here. It's maybe getting through the first layer. Let's see about 3. I don't know if you'll be able to hear on the audio, but how it kind of bogs down. That's just normal from it working through there. Let's see what it looks like if we just run across here. This hammer does have some pits on it, but it's not terribly just worn out. Mainly surface rust. Let's see here. Throw a little bit more on here and see if we can tell a difference. This off. Let's see here. Don't know if the camera can pick up, but this would be the side, kind of an orange rust colored. This is kind of back to the black cast iron looking metal. Might be able to see that line through there. See if we can add like a cross. See if we can kind of see the 4 sections here. And again, this is not a lot of pressure, and I'm on about half speed, which is number 3 here. Say that's a pretty good difference. Not gonna surprise most of y'all that a power tool is faster and easier to use than just using hand tools, but again, I want to try and stay away from niche tools or things that not everybody can have or can get a hold of. Luckily, this is a good example because it is just a Walmart purchase, not extremely expensive, and something you could pick up, which does have quite a bit of use around the house because of this revolution speed selector. You can have it run slower if you were doing like a plastic or something that might melt, and you can turn it all the way up if you really were trying to dig into something, or maybe a tiny cutoff wheel to cut a screw or something like that. But again, make sure you follow all the manufacturer's recommended safety, wear your safety glasses, wear your gloves, and just be safe out there. Well, y'all, I took about, I'd say 10 minutes or so with our Walmart rotary and our little small wire wheel. You might not be able to see, but we're already losing and missing some of those tiny little slivers of metal. So again, wear your safety glasses, be smart with that. Went ahead and knocked off basically all this rust. Went pretty quickly, even this little 500 shows through. Did put some 3-in-1 oil on it and rub it in with a paper towel, and that kind of will help coat it, makes it nice and smooth, and also the rust and all that is now not coming off on your hands. Now on the handle, I just took our 150 and kind of sanded it with something circular like this. You can take and wrap around a handle or something to kind of get all sides. I just spent a couple of minutes with that 150 just to kind of knock off the dirt. As you can see, this is still not like a beautiful piece of art or anything. However, in its essence, it's just a hammer. Anything can be a hammer when you need it, but if you have a hammer, it's good to have one that works well, looks good. Now, I kind of like the way these old, I guess, patinaed older tools look. Really, the fact is, if you want a new tool, that's awesome. You can go buy a new tool, and there's nothing wrong with that. I totally support that. I just kind of like this as a hobby, kind of getting these things back in the toolbox, back on the road per se. Kind of like a vehicle restoration, but just one that gets it running and gets it out on the road. So this is now a functional tool again, looks a lot better, and I think that worked out pretty well. Howdy everybody, welcome back to B-Rad Garage. So gonna wrap up kind of our little tool cleaning video, kind of little restoration, kind of getting stuff back going again. So we had our standard pliers that we got cleaned up quite a bit. This is from the Vinegar, and as you notice, it did dig into this kind of zinc, kind of silvery part a little bit. You can definitely tell the difference between just sandpaper and whatnot versus the chemical. So there's going to need to be some kind of protectant on that. And another way to see that is even with this rusty metal, this is not rusty, but you can tell it's been broken down to a different level. So just something to think about if you're going to use chemicals of any kind. Now these nippers working pretty good. They still need to be kind of pulled open, but they move easily on the front end, and they've still kind of got that shine that we had on from the 3-in-1 oil. Our ball peen hammer, good to go as well. Again, I'm okay with things looking like this when they are old, kind of banged up, but again, holding its kind of a patina type sheen from that 3-in-1 oil. And then our tin snips that we just basically had hit with a grinder just to kind of knock off, then we used a hand file to file those down. I believe those will work okay for general use. A little bit of play in those, but I believe they'll work for their intended purpose. So, you know, kind of got some things back together. We're going to do one more thing. We're going to try to get a little bit of coating of this 3-in-1 oil on here. Maybe see if that kind of cleans these up a little bit. Let's see here. You do this one of two ways. You can put it on your cloth, or you can put it on the actual tool you're working on. I guess right now we'll just pick the cloth. Let's see, we'll just wipe it down here. As you can see, it's taking some of that rust with it. Get another clean spot here. Now this isn't oil, so it'll have some lubricity, can kind of help things kind of get moving again. However, it will also leave a bit of a film or residue, so if you don't want any excess, just kind of wipe it off with one of your shop towels or with a paper towel like we got here. Let's see here, I'll leave some of that in the center there. Not too bad. Now these are still, they've got quite a lot of back and forth in them, and I've kind of got a plan for that. Kind of want to see if I can get a lock washer or something in here to fit in between and kind of take up that gap. But we'll see what we can figure out with that. See what it looks like here on these slip joint pliers. Not near as easy to apply, these having that rust on them, but again, kind of wanted to show the difference in actually going a little bit more effort trying to really clean something up versus maybe get something going that you're going to have out at your camp house or your tackle box, or something that maybe isn't going to see the best life anyway. Sometimes just getting something serviceable is good enough. And I think That's what we'll do here. We'll just put some in the grooves here. As far as usable, I think these are pretty good to go. We'll wipe it down with the dry parts of the cloth so it's not quite as, can't feel it quite as much on the, if I look real close, it looks like these are name brand channel locks. That's a very common term for these. If someone says, hand me the channel locks, they're talking about these types of pliers. It's just that channel lock is a brand, kind of how like folks in the South will say, give me a Coke, but they don't necessarily mean a Coca-Cola. They may just mean a soda of some kind. So just a little something to throw out there. Yeah, I think these turned out pretty good. Pretty good. I appreciate y'all coming with me on this. Hopefully you learned a little something. Again, none of these are beautiful or perfect, but in a way that's kind of my plan here, just to bring things back to the first step. Maybe you can spend a little bit of time, but not too much on them. And don't forget, y'all, anything can be rad.